Our third speaker, Carolin Gerlitz, did her PhD at Goldsmiths College in London, but works now as assistant professor in new media and digital culture, also at the University of Amsterdam. And her research has also, they've co-written together about the like button economy, but broadly speaking, Carolin's research is about the intersections of digital methods, media, and economic sociology. And that includes also interest in platforms, but also web economies, brands, value, topology, numeracy, digital methods, and issue mapping online. And it's important to note that she's been awarded, she holds a significant grant for the project Numbering Life, Measures and Metrics in Digital Media, a topic that really cuts to the core of our panel today as well, but I'll leave it to you to kind of elaborate a bit for 20 minutes on your topic now, please.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. My grant actually only starts on Monday, so
I take it back.
Yeah, we'll
congratulate you on Monday.
To tell you more about that. Today, I'm actually going to taking the panel topic very serious. I didn't pick a specific title for the presentation, but stick with becoming data point, and I'm actually going to talk and show you some data, so be prepared. Also, it's work in progress, so I welcome any kind of comments. So, in Jussi's introduction and in yesterday's panel, a lot of critique on social media data, social media metrics focuses on what economic sociologists usually address as calculation. The separation of individual data points, their recombination, and decontextualization. And a quote that was already brought up yesterday by Adrian McKenzie was that usually it is not the individual data points that matter, but the relations that can be created between them. In the context of social media, these individual decontextualized data points can, for instance, be considered as tweets, replies, retweets, number of likes, number of shares, number of comments, number of digs, number of Google +1s. And those can be recombined into profiles, rankings, scores, dashboards, or sentiment metrics. So whereas this kind of focus on the recombination possibilities rightly addresses the way in which the data is mostly valorized economically, it also, however, draws our attention away from the original data points. And the initial data elements that are being decontextualized and recombined here. Are tweets about Ukrainian politics actually comparable with tweets issued by bots sending you to spammy websites? Can you compare an ironic like with a compassionate like? And in my presentation, I would like to take the title of the panel, Becoming Data Point, seriously by asking, what is it actually that we compare and count into a single number when looking at the data points provided to us by platforms. In his discussion of counting versus calculation, Michael Power differentiates between two different kinds of metrics. First of all, he talks about first-order metrics that, and here I quote from him, first-order measurement relates to the institutions of classifications that make counting initially possible. This level can made to appear natural and primitive when the work of classification becomes invisible and taken for granted. And the first-order metrics of social media platforms can be considered as, the number of likes, shares, comments, or replies. Second-order metrics are the calculative practices that can be performed based on rearranging, recomposing the first-order metrics. And these can be things like, for instance, the cloud score that deliberately picks up metrics predefined by one platform in order to recombine them to identify users' influence scores. In discussions of first and second order metrics outside of social media, the establishment of first order metrics is usually approached as a negotiation of classification or the abstraction, which is very often performed by researchers, observers, or people making sense of initial data. And Wendy Espeland and Michael Saunder, two sociologists, addressed this as a process of commensuration, as the transformation of different qualities into a common metric. And from this perspective, the similarity and accuracy of a metric is not necessarily a property, but emerges from the commensurating agency of an observer that has negotiated the kind of categories through which first-order metrics are being established. In the context of social media, the establishment of first-order metric is not tied to an observer or a researcher setting up classifications, but is situated, can be situated more on the level of software and interfaces themselves. What can be considered as first-order metrics is not necessarily determined ex post, but organized through so-called standardized activities predefined by platforms. And if we draw on Philip Agar, we can understand these standardized activities as the so-called grammar of action, or enabled by platforms determining what users can do, like but not dislike, share, reply, retweet, dig, faff, whatever. And these kind of grammars of action do two things. They enable action, but at the same time transform this action into a standardized data format. They enable what Philip Agar calls the automatic capture of behavior into a standardized metric. Action and metrification collapse, and the commensurating agency is partly delegated from an observer to the level of the platform software. But this process is not necessarily kind of a clean process of commensuration. Previously, research has shown that, platforms deliberately build in some kind of interpretive flexibility, to draw on José van Dijk, into the activities they offer to their users. There is not one way to use Twitter activities. There's not one way to use a like button. And these standardized activities cater to very different use practices. And these use practices are invited for by the individual platforms, but also catered and facilitated by various third-party platforms or third-party devices from which users either access their social media profiles or through which they make sense of social media profiles. However, despite these kind of different practices that are realized in these kind of predefined activities, still each click on a like button, no matter from which purpose, still translates in the same incrementation of the like counter. And the fact that you can count it suggests that we are dealing with something that is similar, if not equivalent. So to develop a critique of such becoming of data points that seem to be referring to comparable units but actually are not, we need to ask how such commensuration can actually be denaturalized, disentangled, and re-embedded in the various practices that feed into this kind of differently comparable data points, and also the actors involved in here. And to do so, I would like to experiment with empirical data point critique. And I do so by actually drawing on a set of methodologies that are usually used to actually repurpose and further recombine these data points. I'm doing so by drawing on digital research methods that are designed to repurpose the analytical capacities of the web that usually are mainly working towards extracting the data points predefined by platforms even further from their context and bringing them into new relations. And this is actually an ongoing research project with my colleague Bernhard Rieder, where we've asked to which extent we can use digital methods in order to inquire what gets lost or remains unseen when working with platform-defined first-order metrics. Metrics, we argue, are not only suggestive of similarity, but they also can be seen as some form of epistemic device, breaking the practices sprawling on platforms apart and putting them together in new various ways. And to denaturalize a first-order metric, we need to understand by what this is animated by, what practices, interfacing platforms, and cultures come to assemble it. And in our project, we do so by looking at the platform Twitter. And by drawing on a very specific data set we took from Twitter, a 1% random sample provided through the Twitter streaming API. And the sample allows us to look at a Twitter collection that is not demarcated by a specific topic or specific user group, but that kind of gives you an overview of the different use practices on Twitter. We work with a 1-week sample collected in June 2014, comprising of 31 million tweets written by 14 million users. And I will only look at the kind of the decomposing of one specific first-order platform metric, and that is the hashtag, which is one of the most used metric in Twitter. And we asked what forms of commensurability researchers buy into when working with a hashtag. So previous studies have already kind of made efforts to re-embed hashtags into the kind of relations of use cultures by intersecting them with other metrics, asking what kind of users engage with what kind of hashtag, or with which other hashtags do hashtags co-occur, to really make more sense of the kind of decontextualized hashtag measure. But one kind of specific perspective or metric on Twitter that has been barely taken into account is the metric of the device from which users send their tweets. Over the last years, we've experienced that Twitter is no longer just accessed via the Twitter web interface, but there's an increasing proliferation of the different ways from through which people access Twitter. In our 1% data set, for instance, we found that there are 50,000 and more different devices from which people actually send tweets. That can be classic web interfaces, that can be apps, mobile apps for mobile phones and tablets, but also that can be Twitter clients, general social media clients that allow you to kind of bring together different social media platforms, tweet automators that allow you to kind of automatically set up profiles and tweet behavior, through up to cross-syndication applications that allow you to automatically send content from another social media platform or another kind of web space to Twitter. The top devices in our data set were, first of all, iPhone, and then secondly, Android, and then only web. So the web interface of Twitter is no longer the most accessed data set. And when starting to look at the relation between the use of hashtags and the use of devices, we found that the kind of the most used devices, obviously, cater to the top frequency hashtags, but the less kind of popular a device of access gets, the more specific hashtags are being kind of brought forward through that device. And this is something that I would like to kind of go further in order to, re-embed the hashtag metric into at least, one further kind of practice that contributes to it. In order to kind of understand this kind of device metric further, we profiled the activities of a number of key devices that we encountered in our data set. And we found that there's a very specific composition of activities coming from different devices. Whereas the kind of most used devices like iPhone, Android, and web show very similar activity patterns, such as the random sample. So we see a lot of mentions and very few, only like around 50% of hashtags and links in all tweets. We find very, very specific engagement formats coming from different devices. So TweetDeck, for instance, a kind of professional social media, the Twitter client, shows very little links, but much more hashtags and forms of interactions. On TweetAdder, which is a kind of automating platform allowing you to kind of set up automating tweet activity, we find the opposite. A lot of links, few hashtags, a lot of hashtags, and little replies. And tweets cross-syndicated from Instagram, where people actually kind of automatically enable that their Instagram posts are being kind of sent further and cross-syndicated to Twitter. We found that, all of these tweets contain links because they send back to Instagram. They contain quite many hashtags, but barely any interactions ad replies. And this is also very specific activity pattern can be seen in tweets sent from tribes. Tribes is a device that automatically sends in-game achievements that users have kind of achieved in kind of Facebook-related tribes games to Twitter. So let's look at the hashtags that are prominent to these devices that kind of really that sharpen these profiles even more. The top hashtags of iPhone users mainly refer to the kind of the most frequent hashtags of the overall data set, but are also already getting a little bit specific. So iPhone users very often engage in shout-out hashtags relating to celebrity and pop events, like MTV Music Video Awards, sports events, but also celebrity culture, talking to YouTube celebrity stars or other celebrities. And in the US, you have to know that the iPhone is the kind of preferred device of teenagers, and their frequency-loaded use practices very often push pop and celebrity topics. In tweets from Instagram, you see very different pictures. Top hashtags center around topics like love, selfie, me, summer, World Cup, happy, friend, and cute. And yeah, produced in the context of another platforms, these tweets are hashtag intensive and create an island of happiness within the Twitter ecology. A very different island appears in relation to the tweet automator TweetAdder. Here, top hashtags are porn, sex, teen, gossip, and hot. TweetAdder features many hashtags and links and mainly seems to be used for the distribution of pornographic materials, often through networks of bots. So, this initial exploration shows us the grammars of action of Twitter are informed by the grammars of action of other platforms, through which people either access Twitter itself or merely cross-syndicate their content too. The different devices imply different regimes of being on Twitter, as they are caught up with different expectations, use practices, and politics. Clients imply professionalization, iPhone devices are populated by teens, and cross-syndicated tweets bring in the kind of content focus of the respective platforms, such as Instagram or Facebook. So there was Twitter first-order metrics, are not only the metrics of Twitter itself, but also include interfacing third-party platforms. And therewith, platform interoperability, as already addressed by Anna, emerges as a very specific technicity of commensuration, allowing activities of one platform to become data point of another. Let's take that kind of ecological approach a little bit further. So we did this so by developing this kind of specific Sankey visualization that allows us to relate even more metrics together to see how the kind of different metrics can help us to kind of bring a little bit more kind of re-embeddedness to a single metric. Then rendering them less discrete, more embedded, but also less comparable. This Sankey visualization is a kind of ecological profile of the hashtag Iraq, which was very central in our data set with the rise of IS at the time. The left side shows the language from which people tweet. The middle shows from which device the different tweets are being sent. And the right side shows the URL the specific tweet points to. The first example, here shows the hashtag Iraq, and the majority of sources the hashtag links to are news sources, obviously, because it was a news topic. What is interesting, however, is that the preferred device from which the hashtag Iraq was tweeted about was the web interface and TweetDeck, pointing to kind of increasingly professionalized use practices, coming eventually from journalists. And what is also interesting is that a lot of these tweets go to YouTube. And when looking at the actual tweets that went to kind of YouTube, we found that they were all pointing to an alternative Iraqi news network promoting their videos via TweetDeck here. Let's move from politics to teen celebrities. The high volume, high specificity hashtag CallMeCam is a very interesting case here. So it's referring to the YouTube celebrity Cameron Dallas. who's apparently highly popular with his YouTube channel, and at some point made a call to his fans to tweet the hashtag #CallMeCam and promised one of you will be kind of receiving a phone call from me. So the hashtag was mainly picked up by iPhone users and was mainly combined, and on the left side now you see the kind of combinations with which the hashtag occurred with itself or with variations of the hashtag. However, so this kind of example shows that, there's a kind of very specific high-volume teenage tweet activity here, but also very intricate relationship between the YouTube celebrity culture and Twitter use practices as performed through the device of the iPhone. Another more special interest hashtag is, let's skip that for time, a less special interest hashtag is the hashtag love. Which shows us a very interesting hashtag engagement format. And that is the form of hashtag hijacking. So as you can see here, it's only a two-partite Sankey showing the device from which the hashtag was tweeted and the kind of URL it sends to. Unsurprisingly, one of the most used devices here is Instagram tweets cross-syndicated from Instagram, sending users back to Instagram. However, the second most used device here is Deliberate, a tweet automator that also automatically generates a tweet content, which is sending users to the websites bugmoda.com and my90. And there was kind of drawing on basically the popularity of the hashtag love in order to distribute spammy promotional content. So basically, when studying a tweet collection based on the hashtag love, what you are studying is very much less specific Twitter activities, but content emerging from a different platform and spammy hashtag hijacking practices. So as I'm running a bit late on time, let's come to a kind of move towards the conclusion. So this initial exploration shows that, whilst the hashtag metric suggests similarity, comparability, and eventually equivalence between what is being counted here, hashtags, it has been shown that the hashtag is actually populated by quite non-similar use practices and platform cultures. And the device metric is only one of many other metrics that we can kind of intersect with the hashtag metric to kind of further re-embed it into diverse use practices. And the conclusion, the initial preliminary conclusion I would like to draw from here is that that commensuration, the kind of making these kind of different practices comparable, is not necessarily the sole accomplishment of the metric itself. I would like to move the focus away from just the performativity of the metric towards the happening of commensuration. Commensuration here is a distributed accomplishment realized through the interpretive flexibility of the metric, the diverse use practices, bot networks, platform interoperability, and the interfacing platforms. And these kind of relations are not stable, but are subject to dynamic use practices and platform interoperability. So when actually aggregating hashtags, tweets, likes, or retweets, we not just count, I would claim, we participate in calculation in the sense of Carolin and Muniesa, by both delineating them from their embeddedness in platform ecologies and relating them to each other in ways that suggest comparability and equivalence. So rather than accounting for first-order metrics on social media as simple transactional data, raw data, records, complete records of user behavior, or mere material for making second-order metrics, this presentation suggests to think them as lively metrics, which participate in what they seek to measure and invite users to write themselves into them. They are lively because they are animated by a variety of different kind of factors and the happening of commensuration. And this basically then opens up the kind of challenge these metrics pose to researchers and also people who engage in digital research methods, because they require to unpack and denaturalize them, not only the fancy kind of circulating second order measures such as cloud or sentiment, but also the more naturalized first order metrics like hashtags, links and shares. Their similarity is not a property, but an accomplishment and a happening. And to speak with Carolin and Muniesa, there needs to be a public debate on what is rendered equivalent, countable, and move beyond its context here. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolin. One quick question? There's one. So, do we have the mic? Let's wait for the mic. Here we go.
Just a comment. Commensurability is a problem as far as I understood it, and I know that this might not be your focus right now. I think it's not a problem in the sense that Twitter would equalize all the activity within its platform, right? They're interested exactly in the kind of stuff that you were exploring, right? What kind of a user an iPhone user is, right? I think that commensurability, the one that needs to be critiqued, is what one could call outside commensurability, which means that, similar to what Anne was saying, that these platforms, these metrics are basically APIs that can connect to monetary flows, in a sense, that can enable efficient management of advertising, that can valorize human activity within the platforms, right? So this is like, I think this needs to be kept in mind in a way, that it is, they actually want to produce these differences and, denaturalize hashtags. This is what Twitter does. It analyzes our activity to then kind of be efficient in promoting stuff and so on. I mean, valorizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Twitter has a lot of interest basically in keeping these metrics broad and flexible in that sense, and definitely also interest in unpacking them further. So in the sense, the kind of the play to unpack them is more towards what do we establish as the kind of raw, what is often referred to as raw data or first order metrics, and the kind of bringing on the table the question of what do we need to kind of unpack ourselves and denaturalize ourselves, as researchers. And I don't necessarily think that Twitter wants to kind of sell us these metrics as a kind of homogeneous ones. Thank
you very much.